Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I am your host, Carrie Roberts, and we are here with another episode that I like to call Connected Conversations. And we are talking about kind of this idea of normalizing male vulnerability and kind of living your life in the way that you would like. And I have two wonderful gentlemen here who also have written books kind of on this kind of self-help topic. So I have Roy Cook and Robert Althouse. Welcome. Excited to have you both here.
Thank you, Carrie.
I appreciate it.
So I want to start off because, I've read both of your books and I wanted to kind of start, in the beginning of your life, even maybe before you wrote these books. And I think, we talk all the time about, I'm very big on inclusion and diversity. I talk about women's rights. I talk about trans rights, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter. But I think, sometimes we forget that men also have these kind of expectations put on them. And there are a lot of times that there's kind of this idea of how a man should be. And I'm curious, and Roy, I'll start with you. When you were growing up, what did you think a man should be, and where did you learn about that from?
I think when I grew up and when I was really young, I believe I was a shy little guy, insecure. And even later when I went into college, I had to make a decision. Listen, Roy, if you're ever going to marry or want to have a relationship, you're going to have to start dating and be comfortable. So I think even into college, I was not comfortable around women and was kind of a shy guy. So I didn't worry about becoming a man. I worried about more mundane things like, I've got to at least be comfortable asking somebody out, or otherwise I've got to learn how to dance, and things like that. So I think I was a pretty insecure, maybe even a little bit through college, although as I look back, I accomplished some things in college, but I believe I'm completely different now than I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, totally different. I agree with the guys that say, if you're the same now as you were last year, that's a problem. That's a big personal problem. I agree with that.
That's interesting that you're saying, as a young man, it was more concerned about the success with being able to ask a girl on a date versus not hearing so much about career or those sorts of things. And it's, everybody's kind of got a different background. I'm curious, Robert, for you as a young man, and I'm thinking again, like teenage, maybe early 20s, was there something that you heard growing up of how a man should be or expectations early on that you were like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to behave. This is what I'm supposed to be doing as a man?
Yeah, I think you pick everything up through your upbringing, societal programming, your cultural beliefs. I generally summarize it as, as boys, we're kind of taught that a man conquers the world. And I think as women, you're taught that you're supposed to please the world to be a good woman. And that's kind of where things go really off track because, a lot of the behavior that comes out in men is very, achievement oriented. It's very goal oriented, and basically everything that's it's allowed in that path, right? To just conquer the world because that makes you this great man. And we're getting very disconnected from our heart at a very early age. And I think actually boys also we don't have a rite of passage anymore. We don't have an initiation anymore where anybody tells us how to become a man, how to become emotionally mature. And among friends, I even noticed that a lot of the conversations are very superficial, especially in that teenage and 20s years. We're not taught to really share our feelings among men, and because we don't want to be weak, and so we have a lot of behavior that comes out sideways because this anger, this repressed emotions, it's going to come out. It's going to come up in some way. This is why we see such a huge rise in domestic abuse and other types of violence that really men kind of bring into the world. I think women, it's a little bit the other side. I mean, they're supposedly taught to be a good woman, to be valuable, you need to look pretty and please the world, and not be yourself and not really be your wild, untamed version because God forbid the world might take offense to it. And women tend to hurt themselves internally, so that's why they have eating disorders, that's why they have thyroid disorders, that adrenal fatigue. I mean, these are all telltale signs that a woman is somehow sacrificing herself, right? So it comes out in different ways, but I think as we're talking about men, I think that disconnection from our heart is really, a huge issue. And we're not taught to connect with our heart. It's all in our brain. It's all rational. We justify and rationalize everything in life.
Roy, what are your thoughts based on what he just said? Do you think that you experience that in any capacity, or do you think that that's something that's happening maybe more nowadays?
Which part of what he said?
Well, just this idea that, the man kind of has to be strong and he can't express his emotions and he is not supposed to kind of talk about his feelings. He kind of has this kind of alpha male is generally kind of the term that people use.
I may have just kind of internalized that. I think when I was young, in fact, my whole life, I haven't had a lot of awareness of things going on around me. When I sit down and talk with people, they're much more aware than I am. I kid Bernice that she says, when you were out in the front yard, did you see the elephant? And I said, elephant? What elephant? And she'd say, he's standing right there. He's 10 feet tall. You can't see him. Oh, yeah. Oh, that elephant. Yeah. So I think, and I was a little slow in developing. My book talks about that. I view myself as a loser in the 30s. I always had good paying jobs, so I was okay there in terms of taking care of that part of the business. But I was insecure and borrowed money from women I dated. That's a no-no. When I would earn multiples of what they'd earn, let's say, and then I started drinking on weekends because I needed to get the courage up if I went out to a bar to meet somebody. So I never had a drinking problem other than that, but that was serious enough to come home alone, let's say like down in Miami once, and drive through a whole bunch of signs that said the freeway ended. And these are as big as billboards, 6 cop cars around me. And fortunately, they didn't arrest me or I would have been fired from Procter Gamble. And that was the apple of its day. So that would have been bad. You went to what was considered the best marketing company in the world maybe at its time. And you couldn't hack it, So I was a pretty slow developer in a lot of ways. So some of the things that Robert says, I agree with him, but I was maybe I was more concerned with fundamentals, dating, finding somebody to date and stuff like that. In terms of male things, I did all of those things. I played sports, I mountain climbed, I rock climbed. I liked all of that stuff. But I had no awareness of what I needed to be a man.
Interesting.
I certainly didn't go through any rite of passage, nor did my dad was pretty strong with me, but he never said, Roy, we need to talk about how you become a man. Sit down, because there's a lot of things you're not doing.
Well, and I think it's interesting to know, right? Like different generations have different things, where we grow up, I think can have a different effect on us. And then of course, like our immediate family, as you both mentioned. Now, in both of your books, you both have worked for some high level companies. You actually both have owned businesses. You both have been quote unquote successful financially. And Robert, I'll start with you. What was the point, kind of early on when you thought, not now with where you're at, but when you thought like, oh, I've made it. This makes me successful. This makes me a man. This makes me like I'm on top of the world. At what point would you say initially, way back when, that was for you, Robert?
I think it was in different gradations, but the pinnacle was kind of where it all came apart, because I reached, my goals. I reached my financial goals, and, I had the beautiful house and the trophy wife and the kids and the toys and everything. And I was like, oh, what the fuck do I do now? Like, I have everything and I'm still not happy. Yeah. And I had, for 20 years, I had been pursuing this. And, just to comment a little bit of what Roy was saying, I had this different twist on, women, because I saw very early on in my childhood, I had 2 older brothers, that, the person, the jock or wherever that got the most girls was also the leader. He was the most respected among the girls and the boys. And so at a very early age, I associated, being successful with girls as like, that makes you a leader, that makes you a man, that makes you like, it's a power game. And, as you can read in my book, I mean, my relationship with women was pretty skewed. I mean, it was kind of the opposite of Roy, but I was just a ferocious womanizer because I saw it as this validation of my manhood that, as long as I was able to do that, then, I was powerful, right? I was a real man. And then if I could be successful in the business world and have money, and, if that gives me power. And I think that's the alpha male kind of on steroids. And that where that led me was that, I was in my early 40s and I sold a big part of my business and I had reached the proverbial mountaintop, and I was literally as empty as it could be because I had sold my soul on the way. I was a cheater in my marriage. I had zero respect for myself. None of it felt good. The way I had gotten there was a lot of elbow work. I worked hard, and but I got involved in a lot of different businesses in Latin America, which, some of it is very questionable. But everything was tolerated. Everything was allowed because I was on this hunt, this chase to reach the mountain peak, and I didn't care how I was going to get there. And I pulverized and caused a lot of hurt on the way getting there. So I got to that point in my early 40s where I was like, and now what? Now what do I do? And later I realized it was kind of my point of awakening. But at the time I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, why am I not enjoying this anymore? Like what is missing?
Yeah, I think that's something, especially people when they're young think like, oh, men and women, if I just get this house, if I just get this person in my life, if I make this money or this job, that then I will be quote unquote successful or happy. And you're not the first person to say, well, I wasn't at that point. And Roy, you had kind of your own story in the book where you kind of talk about, similar thing. You're at this company, you're doing well, you're making money. But then they kind of ask you to do something that you feel is maybe questionable. And so in some ways you feel, again, quote unquote, successful, but it's not the right fit. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, they wanted me. Now that was late in the game. So I was a lot slower developing in every way than Robert. My success came in the 50s. I mean, real success. So about that time, I'm working for a New York-based company. I'm living in a high-rise in San Francisco, and they asked me to do something very unethical. And I started getting panic attacks at night when I would go to sleep, about half an hour after I'd go to sleep, twice a week or so. So I'd leave out of bed, not being able to breathe, going, running to the window, opening the window, and it was out over San Francisco, so I got fresh air out of the ocean. So I said, oh, God, that's a relief. Go back to bed, and Bernice is thinking I'm dying. So after a whole battery of physicians saw me, finding a psychiatrist, so what's going on in your life? And I hadn't made the connection, but I talked about this ethical thing. He said, that's the problem. In fact, I started to describe things. He said, stop, I know what the issue is. And I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, you're either going to have to ride that out or do something else. That's when I became an entrepreneur. I knew a guy who said, I like to make my own mistakes. That's why I'm an entrepreneur. Twice I'd had companies make mistakes for me that affected me. And so I didn't want to do that anymore. So only in my, I was probably 52, let's see, when was that? 52, 53 when that happened. And at that time I was studying self-help. I've always been a pretty good reader. And I was reading Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That book sold about 40 million copies. And then his partner, Hiram Smith, and they talked about core values. And that each of us had them, and 10 to 15 of them. So I spent a lot of time analyzing and found what I felt were my 11. And from then on, the next morning after that, after I quit the company, started my own firm, I did see an opportunity among the big guys like Procter Gamble and Kellogg's and so on, packaged goods companies, that was being unfilled. So from that standpoint, I was an entrepreneur in a classic way. Find an unmet need and fill it. And there wasn't anybody filling it, just my good luck. And unlike Robert, I didn't have a lot of things going. I mean, this was my one deal, my one chance at the plate, and I hit a home run. But I know from talking to entrepreneurs that that's not normal, and I was very fortunate. And later when the economy changed or there was a lot of competition that came into the field, it was a little different story, but that's when I really started feeling good about myself. And because I could make things happen myself, and I had to hire people and train them. And had a different way that I ran the company. I think everybody that runs companies probably does things a little differently than they'd seen, and that gave me a lot of pride and fulfillment. So,
Yeah, I
and
want to
but
mention, you talked about kind of the panic attacks, and Robert was talking about earlier, that it can come internally or externally, that something is off or wrong. When you
mhm.
were having those panic attacks, did you realize that that's what it was? Was it not until you kind of went to a therapist were you kind of having them and pushing them aside, or was this coming consistently? Can you break that down, kind of those moments a little bit for us?
Me, Roy.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know what it was, but it just upset me because I didn't have other problems like that in my life.
Hmm.
I was um, things were going pretty well, and I didn't ever lead a wild life. And Robert sounds like he did all kinds of stuff, all kinds of businesses, and women, and things like that. I didn't lead that kind of life, so I was maybe more conservative, let's say. Only when the psychiatrist said, "I know what the problem is." He really said, "You're ethical, your partners aren't." And I reflected back on a time in 1985. So that was almost 20 years earlier when same thing happened, when a company tried to cheat me out of something. It was so obviously ethical that I quit on the spot. I mean, it was obviously unethical. And so I knew this was a reflection of what happened when an expert told me he thought that. And of
Mm.
course, I found out later that when I quit, within 2 weeks, I had quit and started this other company with a partner that was really good, and the panic attacks went away. That's what I call a clue. So
Yeah, that's when we start to feel better, that's always good. Robert,
yeah,
for you, you talk in the book that you started to kind of feel elements of anxiety or depression. Did you start to kind of notice these things as well, or was it not until you also went to therapy that you kind of started to notice that this was
Well,
happening?
yeah, and the therapy came really, really late, right? I lived a life of inner conflict, and to be honest, I see this all around me now. The way we have a very in this society, in our culture, we have a very perverse relationship with, for instance, alcohol and food and drugs and even sex, porn. Any of these things that people are using to numb themselves. People are walking around generally numbing themselves all the time. I have 3 young kids, and I was talking to one of the mothers the other day, and she said, I can't wait every day until 5:30 because then I have my couple glasses of wine to take the edge off. And I asked her, I said, have you
mm,
ever wondered why you have to take the edge off? Because that's not normal. That's not like we think this is normal. We think it's normal when everything in New York is shut down and they leave the liquor stores open, because that's an essential necessity in our culture. We have such a strange relationship with these things. And, what I realized is I was numbing myself all along. I was numbing myself with alcohol, with sleeping pills. I said I was traveling, so I needed Ambien, but, I was numbing myself. I had anxiety pills. I tried every drug, every recreational drug. I was a little wilder maybe than Roy. I was like walking on the edge, but I fell over the edge plenty of times. But I was very successful. My LinkedIn profile will tell you I'm this great successful guys. I would go out, I party a lot. I was in Colombia a lot, even though I had a family in Miami. I would go out with other businessmen, doing all kinds of things that none of us should be doing at that time of day. And we're all numbing ourselves. We're all somehow not dealing with real life. And we see this everywhere, I mean, go to alcohol, AA meetings. I mean, you see people out on all walks of lives, and they, why are we numbing ourselves? Why are we not living our real life? Well, it's always inner conflict. There's always like we're not living our truth. And it could be something like Roy said. I mean, there's a business experience where we're asked to do something that we don't want to do. But maybe we're just in a job we really don't want to do. We're not living the authentic life
mhm,
that we really want to express into this world.
Hmm.
Maybe we're staying in a relationship because for some reason, we feel we can't have something better, even though we know it's not the right relationship. Maybe we endure abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse for the longest periods of time. You hear this so many times, women that are in a decade-long abusive relationship, and you wonder why, right? And then they numb themselves another way. It could be food, it could be alcohol, could be caffeine, could be smoking, could be drugs, partying, gambling. A lot of successful alpha males, I mean, they gamble, they take excessive risks in business, they start to become self-destructive. And this is the last part I wanted to add. So men tend to inflict their inner conflict, they express it outwards. It's a yang energy that they have. So we hurt the people closest to us. We hurt our loved ones, we hurt our friends, we hurt our family, we hurt our business, and eventually we self-destruct if this energy is not processed, if we have this inner conflict. Women tend to inner destruct. And so they tend to, really vet this inwards, and, they have food disorders, they have, eating disorders, they have adrenal fatigue, they have all those things that, they inflict the pain on themselves. And it's just the yin energy that they're predominantly in. So that's what I mean, that we express it in a different way. But when men express it, this rage, this anger, this violence, when it's not processed properly, this is what we see in the world today. See how much anger and violence we see in so many different things. And I'm not just talking about the wars and the injustices and the inequalities, just how companies are operating in the marketplace, the type of things that are being done. And then, talk about integrity. There's so many products in the world today. There's so many different companies that are putting products and services into the world that really don't really serve humanity. And so, that's where we have all these integrity issues, and then we start numbing ourselves because nobody really wants to live in that reality.
Well, that's why, when I was reading your books and really thinking about, this conversation, I think what's interesting is this idea of vulnerability, because I think, and it's not always women are more vulnerable than men, because that's not always true, but stereotypically it can be. And for men, it can be a lot of times, again, they're taught you don't cry, you don't talk about your feelings, you hold it in, you do what you have to do. This is how you act, even if maybe you're like, wait, this doesn't feel right, or I don't feel good.
Right.
And not only is it hurting you, but it starts to affect people around you. And Robert, you wrote in your book, you talked about with your ex-wife when you were married at the time, kind of this slow kind of decline of just lack of connection. And I think we hear this a lot in relationships, where it's usually when something's going on or someone's dealing with something, women will say maybe more than men, I don't feel a sense of love or that you hear me or whatever it is. And you talked about a little bit about it. You said, I longed for her to be so happy and to have whatever they needed, meaning your wife and kids. And then you said, by now I had a whole dimension of myself that weighed on me like a ton of bricks, but I could not talk about it with my wife, not because she didn't want me to, but because of what I believed I should be doing as a man, husband, and sole provider. This pattern later repeated itself over and over, providing more evidence that misguided beliefs can be incredibly persistent, and my own beliefs were the cause of so much unnecessary suffering. And you kind of talk about, again, like here you are feeling all these things, but you feel like you can't share it with her, and she's feeling frustrated because now she doesn't feel connected. When if you had been vulnerable and opened up, maybe that could have created a better relationship for the two of you. Can you talk about that in a way you feel comfortable, and maybe in a higher level if you want to, of just the vulnerability of why it's important, and maybe the development of that now for yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And let me start by saying, because you're expressing it actually very, very accurately. When I have friends or male friends in any situation, or people come up to me and they ask me relationship advice, or they're in any kind of conflict in their relationship, I always tell them, I said, probably the number one reason why you're in this situation is because she can't feel you. And they always ask me, like, what do you mean by that? And I said, for her to trust you and for her to feel safe and to open up, which is really what you want, she needs to feel you. And when you close off, and I was an expert in this, my heart was like, it had a moat around it. It had armored walls because I didn't want to feel myself. I couldn't deal with the feelings I had. I had low self-worth. That's why I was chasing everything in the world. That's why I was always trying to validate and get recognition. And that's why I had all these different behaviors that, weren't ultimately serving me. But it was all, trying to fill this void on the inside. But I didn't have self-love. So vulnerability starts. You have to start by actually having self-worth, and as a man, be secure and confident enough that you love yourself enough that you can be vulnerable. Because when you don't feel that self-worth, if you don't have love for yourself, you're afraid to be ostracized from the tribe, you have a hard time as a man opening up, because you don't want to be weak, you don't want to be, whatever perception you might have. But I think in a relationship, when a woman can't feel her man, and because it's so much more about what she feels than we're always in our head, right? And we're always like keeping score, like, oh, I did 100 nice things for you, so why aren't you getting any credit for that? Well, when she's in the moment, she wants to feel you in the moment. She wants you to be there, and your heart needs to be open. And a lot of men have a very hard time doing that, because they don't, they can't do it for themselves. They're not, in that place where spiritually, emotionally, and mentally they can really open it up. They have to learn how to basically work with that energy. And that's honestly where the superpowers come from, because once you are able to be more vulnerable and express yourself in a more honest and integrity way, the world actually opens up, because we have this expression in Dutch: you can't kick in an open door. You actually can't get hurt once you're really vulnerable. Once you're really honest like that and truthful, then there's nothing to poke at anymore. There's nothing to protect anymore. And as a man, and as a woman too, but as a man, this is where you get true charisma. This is where you really get presence, because people see that it's real. You're just authentic. Everything you say that comes from a core. It's not a story anymore. It's not some kind of persona that you're acting out. No, this is really like your core is coming through. And it's very, very powerful. It's very powerful in relationships, but it's very powerful in business in general, because people want to connect with something that's real. I think this world is craving for realness, because everything is so goddamn fake, including what we see on social media, what we see on TV. It's all fabricated, right? It's all filtered and fabricated. And we're so craving for that authentic, real, let me see your real, true you. Obviously, when, the last thing I'll say about it is that when we show up that way, in a true, authentic way, we're also giving permission for someone else to do that. And now someone else can drop that weight, that ballast from having that persona, that mask, the hundreds of masks that we wear. And now someone else can just be themselves, and that's probably maybe the biggest gift you can give anybody else, because, we're wearing so many masks, and we're living so many, stories that we think we have to live, and the way we need to look, and the way we need to speak. And, we have so much societal programming and cultural beliefs and maybe religious dogma that we grew up with. I think the art is letting all that go. And the vulnerability is really in just being your true self and being okay with that.
Yeah, I agree. When we're vulnerable, it can feel hard at first, but you're right. It kind of lets a weight off, and you connect with the other person, and then that person tends to be more vulnerable, and it just creates a better sense of intimacy in a romantic relationship, but in friendship or business or family, a sense of trust.
Well,
Roy, is this something that you have felt has been easy for you to do always, to be vulnerable with people, with your wife, or is that something you've had to kind of work on?
That's not a problem that I've had. I've probably been insecure. When I left college, I left my home, and so I never came back to Oregon. And so I was always on my own. So my dad couldn't help get me a job, or his friends or whatever, or I couldn't. When I first started with Procter Gamble for 3.5 years, I was traveling with one suitcase. They had an oddball job. So I'm living all over the country, not night after night, but not one night here, but 6 weeks in Boston, 6 weeks in Miami. And I kind of liked that, because I felt I could develop myself then. So all those challenges I had in college, I could grow. There's no audience out there. So I could just kind of grow a little bit. I'm not as aware as Robert is about what he sees, but I see the result of it. When I get on BART, the rapid transit from the city, occasionally, and be going to the suburbs for some reason, maybe to a restaurant at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, everybody on BART would be asleep. And I'd see these 20, 30-year-olds and so on. I said, they can't all be tired. My God, they've got unlimited energy at 23. But the whole, and the same thing with late planes. I'd get on a plane, everybody's asleep. And I'd say, and I made the conclusion, they don't like their life. They're not doing well. They're failing. They're not happy. I mean, I might be 40, but you know, if you're excited about life, you're interested in talking to someone, you see somebody like this. And the same thing when I'm flying, I'd say the same thing. So I know that that's out there. My problems were maybe other than that, being shy initially, and then being irresponsible up until my mid-30s, you know, where I'm late to everything. I'm going on a 50-year relationship with my wife, but she had to tell me, you're the most selfish SOB I've ever met. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, you're late to everything. She said, don't you realize that's a sign that you don't care about anybody else? And some other guy said to me, you're an elitist. I said, what the hell's an elitist? He said, you only like to hang around with people that are elite. I said, well, who are they? They're smarter, they're more attractive and everything. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? That sounds like that's a good thing. You know, I never did come to terms with it, but I know what he meant by that. You don't have time for people that don't seem to have a lot going for them. That's not a good thing. You know, that's not a good thing.
But
so go ahead.
I'm just curious, why is that not a good thing? Because to me, that's a story you have, and some cultural belief, that some guilt or shame. It's a story to me, what you're saying,
Yeah,
because
it's a story.
you know, it's a total story in your head from some cultural upbringing. Like, you need to have deference for people that are not as successful, and it's not that you don't respect them, but you can choose to associate with those people that lift you up the most. There's nothing wrong with it.
Like you should do that. You should do that. Yeah.
I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. That doesn't make you an elitist. That makes you conscious about your limited amount of time that you have, and you preserve your energy, and you want to feed that with, you know, commensurate energy that lifts you up. I think that's only good, to be honest. Sorry that I interject.
Yeah.
But,
No, it's all right.
you know,
I mean, I agree with you. I think what he saw, I'm glad you brought that up because I missed a key point. I think what he saw is a little bit of disdain for others that weren't like that. You know, where I could see, he probably heard me say things that were critical of others. Why can't these people do this or that? What is holding them back? Because,
but let me ask you, I was going to say, Roy, so when first of all, I just love, congrats on you and your wife. And I love that I think a part of a good relationship is when you can be honest with each other. And that means calling each other out on when you're not doing things that are great. When you hear that, was there any sense of ego that was like, no, I'm not like that? Or was there an element of like, let me stop. Is there some truth to what she's saying? And what kind of goes through?
I am a guy. And so, you know, there's always that challenge, who's challenging the fortress. But I think that I've come to change from when I met her. She'd be learning more from me than I would from her, because I'm the one that traveled and studied history and went to lectures at Berkeley and Stanford and did all this stuff. And I'm the one that built the company. But I realized later that the things that really mattered to me, she taught me. So I would say most of my learning came from her. And so she's probably more mature than I am. And I did just hesitate and say, you know, that's right. I am always late. Part of me wanted to say, well, what's the matter with that? You know, I mean, which is a jackass comment. You know, what's the matter with being late on people?
Well, that's
they can
something.
Wait till when the king arrives. That's
what I was going to say. It's kind of what Robert said. And, you know, when it comes to feedback from people, especially people we love, you know, we really care about their opinion. Sometimes there is this mix of like, you have to figure out like, what is truth? But what is also, what am I okay with? Like I really like when people are on time. I'm a scheduler, I'm a planner. Like that's just how I am. But there's an element of, sometimes I'll get frustrated when somebody's not that way, but I'm also like, okay, well, that's just how they are. It doesn't mean like they're doing anything wrong, but it's also a boundary. Like, you know, if I have someone who's constantly late all the time, then I'm probably not going to be around them that much, just because it might frustrate me, or there might be a boundary. So it's interesting. I don't know, Robert, do you have any way that when you handle feedback, whether it's from people, you know, that you are close with and love versus random people, how you kind of decipher the difference between this is something, maybe there's some truth and I should adjust this, versus no, that's how I am, and I don't care what they think?
No, I always try to listen to feedback, and obviously, you know, we all have an ego. We all, but I think it's quite easy. I mean, once you kind of acknowledge, okay, that's my ego responding. I mean, what is this person trying to tell me? And you know, we all look through our own lens, and our lens is tainted by the experience that we have. Our whole subconscious brain is just a library of experiences, and you know, our brain is a meaning making machine. So everything that happens in our life, we give a meaning, and it goes into the database, and you know, we refer to that database with every experience that we have. So everybody has a different lens. We're never going to see eye to eye. We're never going to know what it is to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, because we just haven't lived their life. We're not. But I think we can, you know, take the information and just say, okay, well, what's this person is trying to tell me? I mean, are they, first of all, is it constructive? Are they trying to help me? Are they trying to better me? Are they having the best interest in heart? Or are they really just trying to undercut? Or maybe are they just lost in their own story about something that's supposed to be that way? And, you know, I can give you plenty of examples of that, especially cultural things where, you know, we're so hung up on how culturally something is supposed to be done. But then you go to another country and they do it in a different way. So who says what is the right way? And, you know, the other thing I wanted to kind of get back to is you said those people on BART that are asleep. You know, when I coach people and when I work with people, I always first tell them, like, it is absolutely, can I say F word?
Yeah.
It is absolutely fucking exhausting to live someone else's life.
Yeah.
And this is what 99% of people in the world do.
Yeah.
This is what I did,
Yeah.
right? Because we grow up
Mhm.
and our parents give us their version of the world. And then we grow up in a society and it gives its version of the world. And then we have maybe religious belief, cultural beliefs, whatever else, you know, social subgroup beliefs. And we go into the world and we go live this life that we think we're supposed to live. You know, we go out because we think we're supposed to do it. Very few of us have like our own North Star figured out and say, like, this is really my authentic path in life and this is what I want to do. So we're living someone else's life. We're living these stories that we think we have to live. And somewhere along the line, you know, we could get lucky and kind of get bumped on our road and our North Star. But for many of us, we find ourselves asleep on the star, because we're not living our life that we really want to do. It's not our highest good. This is not aligned with our talents, our gifts, and our superpowers, which we all have. We all have something amazing to contribute to this world. And we have, you know, our job is to find our passion, because our passion is always where we're going to be the best. That's where we're going to live our authentic life. That's where our talents, our gifts, our superpowers are all going to come into alignment. But we don't live that life, right? We end up sleeping on BART. And then after that, we're in a culture where people eat incredibly unhealthy. They drink, they smoke, they eat. And I'm not here to, you know, say everybody should be a monk. I mean, live life, enjoy life. But, you know, the stuff that you put in your body is the energy that you have, right? And so, you know, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about the vaccinations, but I think it's ironic that people go through the drive-through McDonald's in the morning, put absolute crap in their body, and then go get a vaccination and think that that's going to make them healthy. Right. And on the way home, you know, they pick up a bottle of gin and they go drink at home and annihilate their own immune system. So, you know, we live in a really, really strange world where people are so off in so many different ways. And yeah, you end up sleeping on the train. You end up being tired at night. You end up, you know, not being energized, and you're not seeing the beautiful things in the world. And you're not kind of picking up on all the smells and of the roses that are all around us all the time. And you only find that once you kind of find your passion and you live in alignment and you stop living someone else's story. That's when you don't fall asleep on the train anymore.
Yeah, which brings me to a little bit about Roy and his book, which really talks about this idea of focusing on our core values first, because it's very common, even in extracurricular activities, for people to say, "What's your goal? Like, what's your goal? What are you doing? What's meet your goal? When are you going to meet the goal by?" I'm a dancer. That was my primary passion, and that's what I did for a living, and now I just do it for fun. And I remember taking a lesson and the person was like, "So what's your goal?" I was like, I just want to enjoy it. I was like, I don't think I need to have a goal with this. That's not the purpose of what I'm doing it for anymore. And so, in Roy, your book, you said that core values are understood to be an inherent part of each individual. Most of us have 10 to 20 core values. And you talk about some of the people who've written about them in the past. Can you talk a little bit about why core values matter more and first before goals?
Well, because if you don't know what your values are, you can't even set the right goals. You're not the same as anybody you've ever met. You don't share the same level of creativity, of integrity, of energy, of desire to give back. So how in the world can you expect them to set decent goals for you, even if they're friends? Covey and Smith, if Covey talks, I listen. And Covey said, all of us have, they were Mormons, so they believe it happened at birth. All of us have core values. And now, having taught it for 10 years, free at a local university, but to adults, I agree with that. I have 11 core values. I have no doubt about them. And the ones that aren't my core values that I'd like to have, like creativity, is not a core value of mine. But integrity is, as you found out, or I wouldn't have responded the way I did. And integrity, the way I write it, it's not just a word, that's a paragraph you have to write. I found that everybody, there are about 360 values that I've identified, and everybody has about 10 to 20. And after they find those things, since they're internal, they don't change, and they're not added later. Somebody says, you mean you can't add a core value at 25? Not in my experience. Maybe you could. Maybe if you went to a concentration camp or you'd be jarred so much it would you can certainly change your priorities. Probably if you spent 10 years in a concentration camp, maybe integrity and a few other things would be moved up on the list. But if after you find that, you make every decision you make in your life consistent with those values, you'll have both Covey and Smith promised in writing, you'll have a fulfilled life with peace of mind. That would translate to what Aristotle calls happiness. But happiness is kind of a generic word. And my picture, a real big fat guy with a six-pack of beer and a clicker watching an NFL game, he's happy. So I'm happy as hell. I don't have a concern in the world till the game's over, And he hasn't taken out the garbage or a lot of other things that he hasn't done. So now you've allowed me to give a pitch for my book, but that's basically what's in it. And that didn't come to me until 53, and then having this thing happen at the same time, studying core values. And that means to me that I don't do anything. I believe in that guy that wrote the book Essentialism. We've talked about that. I've separated all the other stuff out from my life, things that I own and things that I do. I don't waste time doing things that don't honor a core value. So I'm not painting. I'm not learning to play the piano and the sax. I've long felt I'd like to learn to play the piano. I like Bach and I like classical pianists. But it would be tougher for me to do that because if it's not a core value of mine, what I found out, I'd have to use a very undependable ally, and that's willpower, which dies out every day after about 4 or 5. Everybody that writes about it says that. So I agree with that. But if creativity is a core value of yours, if you're one of those people that said, Carrie and Robert, if I couldn't paint, I would rather not live. There are people like that. Well, they're not going to have any problem, maybe a little problem. I don't want to exaggerate, but they're not going to have the problem I'd have, where every exercise in learning to play the guitar would be painful, and it would be tough for me to do. And the things that are core values are not tough for you to do. You don't have to get up in the morning and use willpower to do most of those things. So that's what I found. I've seen it has changed lives. I met with Hiram Smith, Covey's partner, and we talked about this right before he died. I didn't realize he was going to die 3 weeks later. And it's changed their lives, and they'd have a lot of evidence because they used to teach us 30 years ago. Then it just died out. It's not there anymore. Nobody talks about core values. There aren't books written about it. It's not there. So if you're one that bases your life on setting goals, you're going about it wrong, and you're going to be, some of those goals will be right and some will be dead wrong for you. but your buddy or somebody you honored. In fact, that's a thing that came through my mind with Robert. The tough thing nowadays is to find the men and women in your life that are honorable, that are worth learning from, that are worth being around. That's tough to do because, as Robert said, they're not fully human in a lot of ways. They're using drugs, they're using alcohol, they're insecure, they don't know how to maybe have a good marriage. They try to win in marriage. Those things I used to read about 20 years ago by women on how to win in marriage. I used to say, my God, just meet the guy halfway, he'll give you the world, you know. Compliment him every now and then, he'll give you the world. You're not going to win. That isn't a win-win. That's not the goal of marriage, is to win. I understand where that came from. That came from a sex that's been held down. And that was looking for the 80s or 90s where they'd be earning the same kind of money as men. And then they could, you know, be independent. They've done that. And unfortunately for men, a lot of men have given up. They've become the wife at home, or they just can't compete head to head. So in my world, that's good. I like that. Women have caught up and they're even, in some cases they're ahead. I think that's good. Maybe men can learn now how to deal with women, how to live with them, how to appreciate them.
Before I get to you, Robert, I was just going to comment real quick, Roy, because something you wrote in your book resonated with me, where you talked about, to some extent, you know, listen, how to find your core values and what they are. You know, obviously looking at the list, but there's kind of two opposing things that happen. It's the things that you do that give you so much joy and so much excitement and flow. And then there are the things that you like really dread and feel tired on the train and feel exhausted and feel drained. And notice, you know, either of those, you're either leading towards a core value or pulling away. And that's something I've definitely experienced. And I know almost immediately the difference, and I can feel it. I can feel it with people. I can feel it with types of work. I can feel it with, you know, different things I do. Like you said, I'm a dancer. So creativity must be one of my 10, because I cannot, if I didn't have dance, I would go crazy. So
there's no question that it is, if
right.
That's what you say.
Right, exactly.
Whereas I can live without dance.
Yeah, exactly. Where I could live without sports. You know, some people need to watch it every day. I really don't care.
Well, so there's no sports core value.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? So what's one of yours, besides integrity, Roy, that you would say that you've noticed on your list that either you were in flow and you noticed it, or something irritated you besides the integrity example you gave?
By the way, you will feel it. There's no question. Now, you may kid yourself because you're, let's say Robert and I were best friends and he always admired this attribute in other people. And I said, well, I'd like to have that attribute because I'd like Robert to like me. You know, your dad always felt that way. So you could kid yourself. Here's my 11 in order. So part of it is getting them in order. So when you act, they can conflict. You know, you can have a friend who's dying at the hospital at the same time as a friend who comes from out of town, or an event you wanted to see forever, and it's the exact same time. You know what you should do. You should go see the friend. So here they are, just rattle them off. One word, although there's a definition behind them, so the word won't mean anything. Spiritual, family, health, integrity, value-based life, community. I'll define that for you. I mean, give back in that case. Freedom, and I'm talking about financially free. You control time and money. Accomplishment, learning and teaching. Teaching is part of learning, I guess. Resoluteness and renewal. Renewal is a cop-out. That means it's anything you use. It could be watching NFL games or dancing or whatever. Although dancing might have a little higher value, I guess, on somebody's scale. But anything you use to renew. Now, you may not be a gardener, but you like to garden because it refreshes you. Or you take a long walk, you look around, you play the guitar, you watch an NFL game, you watch a TCM movie. Like me, maybe you like film noirs that happen on Sunday morning for TCM. So that's a renewal. I don't do anything that's outside of that.
And you feel overall that now you're living a better life, a more successful life
there's no
according to
question.
you. Yeah.
I'm
Hmm.
I'm happier about it. I'm
Mm.
more apt to try to build up other people. I have a
Mhm.
belief about that. When I meet somebody new, I try to find something good about them and tell them that right at that meeting.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
try to do that. I won't do it if they're a jackass. But, I like the way you're a jackass with me.
I like how the two
I
of you are
admire
both
that.
very honest today. I love it.
Let me invite my friend Robert over to punch his lights out. So
That's so funny.
so I
Yeah.
think, and I'm able to do that. I feel comfortable doing that. I like
Mhm.
to do that, and I notice people don't do that. I
Oh
was
yeah,
once
I'm the
speaking in
same.
front
If
of
I see somebody is like dressed really nicely or they do something well, I always, because I feel like there's never enough
right,
positivity. There's never enough compliments.
but
Like you can
especially if it's a
never tell
personal
someone enough.
trait, the way they look at something,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
really believe that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
once I got a bunch of fraternity brothers and their wives together, and we go down to Mexico and raise money for kids and stuff. So this is long after we were together. And I remember standing up in front of them, and this took a little guts, but I was talking about that trait. And I said, something? If I don't get a compliment from somebody, this sounds egotistical, but it was fun for me to say it. If I don't get a compliment from somebody, let's say in a year, I find another friend. Now, what I wanted to say is in a week, but I didn't want to be a total jackass. So, but I didn't want them to think about that, because I'm doing that with them.
Mhm.
And I'd
Mhm.
like to get a few myself. And,
Mhm.
and you'd want to say, do you think you can find something about me? Because it's a better world if you're doing that. I tell
Well,
my
yeah, and
wife
from
that I
a
love her every
genuine
night,
way.
and I tell her every day things that I like about her that are remarkable, that um,
Roy, can I
that
ask you a
women
question?
have. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm not challenging you at all, but are you giving the compliments because you really want to get a compliment back, or are you giving the
No,
compliment because it's a genuine compliment?
I don't. That's a very good question. If it's the latter, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not
So,
going to do it. I don't do it to get a compliment back. I don't hang around for the compliment. I'm not comfortable if they give me a compliment back. And I say it in a way that I don't get compliments back,
right.
because that means that, well, I've kind of forced it. You have something you want to tell me before I leave? No, I don't want to do. I don't want to do
Right.
that. It's get a compliment. Everybody you meet, Robert, I could compliment you. I mean, we've been talking for a little while here. You said some things that are very impressive, and uh, so why wouldn't I do that? I mean, if I were talking to
No,
you,
I
you
totally
know,
agree. But the reason I was asking because I think when we give a compliment to someone else, we're really in a way complimenting ourselves, right? And that's in a good way, in a very positive way,
Mhm.
because we cannot have in this world on a spiritual level what we cannot celebrate in someone else. And
Oh,
that's
that's an
that's
interesting point.
that's a universal law. There's so many people that want to manifest a lot of abundance. They want to, and then they're,
Yes.
they want to have a lot of money. They want to have a lot of big house and all that. Until you're genuinely happy for your closest friend, your closest family member, or a person you don't even know, genuinely happy that they achieved that, you will never accomplish it yourself,
Yeah,
because you cannot have on an energetic
I
level
agree.
what you envy. And so when we compliment another person, and when you say, "Hey, you look fantastic. You're beaming. What's going on? You look fantastic. You look beautiful," or whatever it is, or you have a great jacket. That suits really. That tie is like killer. Where did you get that? Whatever it is, right? It can be at such such a benign level. But when we compliment someone else, we're really giving ourselves a compliment. We're giving ourselves love as well, because we're basically in a way acknowledging ourselves in that sense too.
I think
And
that's true. Yeah.
we're doing so, and I agree with you. We're doing so few of this in the world because people, 99% of the time, they're thinking about their fucking selves.
Yeah.
Well,
You're,
that's why some
you're
people get sometimes so anxious about stuff, and it's like no one's really looking
all
at you. No one's really thinking
nobody's look.
at all. Like we get so stressed.
And the person, and this goes to what Roy, some of the points Roy was making. The person that can make you feel seen, right? That person is like, whew, man, that person has presence for you. That person has
Yep.
Mhm.
charisma for you. And this can be just someone in the elevator. And I don't try to abuse this, whatever, but I will be in an elevator and there's another person in the elevator. If you can just look them in the eye and just say genuinely good morning and make them feel seen in that moment,
Yep.
like their energy changes. We are
Mhm.
so powerful as beings, but we're
Yeah,
so
we are.
inward focused. We are so inward focused. We're so like worried about, do I look all right? Am I sounding smart? Am I going to be on time? Like we've got 100 million things going on in our head. And all we should really try to do is just quieten that noise a little bit, right? And just look into the world and look into the people and genuinely pay attention to what's happening in the world. And it will make you more successful on 100 million levels, because you will start seeing so much that we're just not taking in. It's all there. It's all there for us to
No.
see, to interact with, people are giving you cues all day long. They don't even have to talk, right? Even when we
Well,
go
yeah,
to
it's like, I mean, if you, I think it was, well, if you can't see them, if you're just hearing them, it's like 96% is the
oh,
intonation
it's
and the
crazy.
inflection, and it's crazy.
And
Robert, do you resonate with this idea of what Roy's talking about core values? Because one of the things that Robert said, or Roy said, is that, core values are with you from birth unless you go through something maybe pretty traumatic. And,
yeah,
Robert, for you kind of went through a really,
yeah,
traumatic
yeah.
experience, but like over time, do you think that you have core values that maybe have changed, or can you name any for you? I know you haven't seen the list that he has, but is there anything that stands out for you particularly?
Yeah, let me start by saying I'm going to read Roy's book because it sounds really interesting, and I want to understand it better. So yeah, I do believe in core values. I am a really firm believer, though, that at our very essence, at our soul level, we are just energy, and so we can change, we can transform as human beings. We can transform in a second.
Mhm.
When we change our wiring, we can change completely, and that's then going to be physically represented as well. I look totally different like I did 10 years ago. People don't recognize me in pictures from 10 years ago.
Mm.
Everything changes. We have this unique ability as humans to wake up every morning and be a completely different person than we were from yesterday. You commented on this, Roy, like you should not be the same person you were last year. We're never.
Yeah.
Every morning we wake up, and like how deliberate and how much attention we pay to this will dictate how fast we can, and how much aligned we can be moving through life. But I do believe in core values. I also believe, and this is what I write mostly about in our book, that we're so busy and we're so preoccupied with chasing shit in the world. And this comes from our story, from our upbringing. And, we believe that our happiness is going to be in that great job, in that fantastic partner, that, beautiful car that we have, and the houses and the vacations and all that stuff. And, we're trying to seek it all on the outside, but it's all within. I had millions and millions of dollars in the bank, and I still didn't feel rich. And when I
Mhm.
explained it to someone that never had millions in the bank, they say, you're crazy. Of course you're going to feel rich. No, because I felt poor on the inside.
Mhm.
I didn't feel abundance. I grew up with a father that was a product from World War II that had a scarcity mentality. The more money I had, the more afraid I was to lose it. I
Mm.
was like paralyzed by that. I was paralyzed that it might go. I might just, not stay, or maybe I cannot go and make it again. So, all these things that we want, abundance, success, love, whatever you name it, it's all an internal job. We either feel it on the inside or we don't. And then it manifests on the outside. And so it really doesn't make any difference how much money you have in your bank account. You're going to feel abundant when you feel abundant on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I
You know,
agree
you're
with
gonna
that
you're gonna
completely.
feel you're gonna feel love when you have love on the inside. That's where you experience it. It's not in the partner. Of course, the partner can be a beautiful dimension added to your life, but that love you feel from the inside, and it usually has to start with self-love, because you cannot unconditionally love another
Yeah.
person
Right.
unless you have
I agree.
love for yourself, right? Because then we're just interacting in transactional love. But
Yeah.
I do believe in core values, and I think integrity was my lifeline, because my life lacked so much integrity, and my lack of integrity was with my soul. And so I had watered down every value in my life. I couldn't watch myself in the mirror. I was looking at this man that the world thought was incredibly successful, and I was like, you are despicable. You mean I literally, like, you're a cheater. You're nothing you say or pretend to be. You know, the way you show up in the world, the way you have accumulated your status, your power, your position. You're a narcissistic asshole. But the world loves you because your LinkedIn profile is fantastic, and you're a successful businessman, and you drive a fancy car. So in the eyes of the world, you've made it. But I looked at myself and I said, you know, I can't stand you. I can't stand what you have become. And that became the unraveling of, you know, well, what am I really? I mean, what do I really care about? And, you know, obviously I went through some trials and tribulations that I write about in my book, had to eventually lose a lot to gain everything. But, you know, these are some of the trials we go through. But I do think we have the ability to change. There's never a loss of hope. I don't care how addicted you are to whatever substance. I don't care where you are. The human ability to persevere, to change, you know, is enormous. But we have a huge, you know, this brain that we have is very powerful, and we have to open up our heart and really start coming from this heart's intelligence, which is another heart, you know, it has 40 billion neurons. There's a huge intelligence, and that's really more in alignment with our soul, with our purpose, with, you know, where our core values, I'm sure, come from. Because, you know, I do believe that we have that, and living a life in alignment with those things is what gets us to happiness. And like the guy on the bench that Roy was describing, that's you know, sitting and watching the NFL game with a six-pack, nothing wrong with that. But that guy is entertained. He's not happy. He's just entertained. He's numbed, right?
He's not happy.
And he's not under the underlying current is not happiness. You know, when I see people that, you know, when I go to take my kids to Disney World, I was there a couple of weeks ago with spring break, and, you know, I walk around Disney World and I see all these people huffing and puffing, and, you know, they're just, and then they shoving this crap down their throat, their pie holes, and you know, the way they live life, and I'm like, none of them are happy. And then, you know, they're bickering, they're fighting, and this is supposed to be like the highlight of the family. You know, they saved all year to be together in Disneyland, and they're just bickering and fighting, and they're nasty. You know, the kids are running around on sugar rushes, and obviously sugar rush comes with a crash. And, you know, I look at it and I'm like, oh man, life is so simple. If you just knew, right, you know, how to do a few things a little bit different. Right.
Well, and I think, you know, as we're just coming up on the hour here for both of you, I think, you know, it's good for both of you to kind of share your stories and this message of like, look, nobody's perfect, and everybody has these moments to learn and to grow, and to do it in your own way. You know, I think, you know, you both, there are similarities, but definitely, you know, different ways that you both have done it. But like you said, you know, it's like we're in charge of our life, and you have to kind of look in, find what matters to you, find the things that you need to adjust for you. And then life feels a little bit better, feels maybe a little bit easier, maybe a little bit happier with actual, maybe less stuff or the wrong people out of your life. So I think that's a good message overall. If people want to read either of your book or they want to connect with you, where is the best place to do that? Robert, I'll start with you.
I'm on Instagram at Robert Althouse, the handle, and I have a website, neverenoughfitis.com. My book is on Amazon at the same thing. I'm the only one with this weird last name, so I'm easy to find once you know my last name. But those are the best places. I'm on LinkedIn as well. You could connect with me there. I post there almost daily. So those are the main places. And my website, robertalthouse.com, is being finalized, and that's going to go up in about 2 weeks, so people will be able to find me there as well.
Perfect. And Roy, where can people connect with you or get your book as well?
Well, because of my age, I'm not trying to build a business or anything, so I don't have a website. I'm violating a cardinal rule of a writer. So they can either buy A Fool's Errand at Amazon, that's what the book is called, or I do a lot of blogging on medium.com. So if they go and look at Roy Cook, if they want to learn about core values, I've pretty much taken this book and serialized it on medium.com, except for the chapter that tells you how to find your core values, because I'm not an idiot. I wanted a few people to buy the book. So that's what they can do. And then we can respond back and forth. That's the only way. I don't use much social media, although I do go on. My publisher beat me enough that I know I need to get on them a little bit if I want to sell any books.
Well, I think, the good thing I've had, so many people on this show of all walks of life and all stories and those that have written books. I think what I always enjoy is there's a personal piece to it, really kind of sharing your own stories and then saying, look, here's what I've learned from my time or from my reading. And if it helps someone, one person, two people, that's great. And so I think that's what each of you have done. And so I thank you both so much for being here, for sharing your thoughts on this topic overall. And I look forward to hearing more in the future.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Carrie.
Carrie.
And thank you, Roy. It was a